The day had been long and tiring for the poor tailor. His small shop stood on the edge of a busy street, squeezed between big stores with shiny glass doors. Every day, he opened the shop early in the morning and worked until the sun went down, stitching torn clothes, adjusting trousers, and fixing buttons for people who didn't have money to buy new clothes. His hands were rough from years of holding needles and fabric, and his back ached from bending over the sewing machine for hours. Business was slow these days. People preferred ready-made clothes from big stores, and only a few came to him for repairs. The tailor didn't complain. He was used to this life. It was not easy, but it was honest work. He lived alone in a small rented room above the shop. There were nights when he ate only bread and tea because there wasn't enough money for a proper meal. Yet he kept working, hoping that one day things might change. That evening, as the sky grew dark and clouds rolled in, he was packing up his tools, ready to close the shop. The wind outside carried the smell of rain, and he wanted to get home before the storm began. Just as he was about to lock the door, a man rushed inside. He was tall, well-dressed, and looked like he had come straight from an important meeting. His suit was expensive, made from fine fabric, but the sleeve was badly torn, as if it had caught on something sharp. The man's face showed urgency. He looked around the tiny shop, then at the tailor, and said, "Can you fix this right now?" "Please, it's important." The tailor hesitated for a moment. It was late, and he was tired. But he saw the man's anxious face and nodded. "I can fix it," he said softly. "It will take some time. You can wait here." The man gave a quick, relieved smile and sat on the wooden stool near the door. He kept checking his watch, clearly in a hurry. The tailor pulled out his tools again, switched on the dim yellow bulb hanging above the table, and began his work. As he stitched the torn sleeve, the shop stayed quiet except for the steady sound of the sewing machine. The man made a few phone calls, speaking in a low but firm voice about meetings, deals, and investors. The tailor understood then that this man was someone important, maybe a businessman or a leader of some big company. But the tailor didn't ask questions. He focused on the torn fabric, making sure every stitch was neat and strong. He treated this suit the same way he treated clothes brought by poor workers and school children, giving his best. Work no matter who the customer was. After a few minutes, the man ended his calls and looked around the small shop. It was nothing more than a single room with cracked walls and a few old shelves holding spools of thread and fabric pieces. A faded calendar hung on one wall, showing last year's dates. The man asked casually, "Do you work here alone?" The tailor nodded without looking up. "Yes, it's just me. Been here for years," he said. The man watched him for a moment, and then asked, "Is business good?" The tailor smiled faintly. "Some days are good. Some days not so much. But it keeps me alive." There was no bitterness in his voice, no complaint. He spoke as if this life of struggle was something he had learned to live with. That seemed to surprise the man. Most people would talk about their problems, maybe ask for help. But this tailor simply carried on with quiet dignity. When the last stitch was done, the tailor carefully pressed the sleeve with his small iron and held up the suit. It looked perfect, as if it had never been torn. He handed it to the man and said, "Here, all fixed." The man checked the sleeve closely, then looked at the tailor with respect. "How much do I owe you?" he asked. The tailor named a small amount, just enough for the work done. But the man took out extra money and said, "You worked late for me. Take this." The tailor shook his head. "No, I charge only for the work. Nothing more." The man seemed surprised. People rarely refused money. But the tailor simply smiled and started packing his tools again. He didn't know yet that this small act of kindness and honesty was about to change his life in a way he could never imagine. The rain had started by the time the man stepped out of the shop wearing his perfectly fixed suit. The tailor watched him leave, wondering for a moment what kind of life someone like that must live: big meetings, important people, shining cars. But he quickly pushed the thought away. He was used to seeing people come and go. Life had taught him not to expect anything from anyone. The next morning was like any other. The tailor opened his shop early, swept the floor, set up his sewing machine, and waited for customers. Some days were busy, but most days were quiet. This day turned out to be one of the quiet ones. A few school children came to get their uniforms mended, and a man brought an old jacket with a broken zipper. By evening, the tailor was counting the few coins he had earned, wondering if he would have enough for rent this month. As he was about to close for the day, the same man from last night walked in. This time, there was no torn suit, no rush. He looked calm, almost friendly. The tailor was a little surprised but greeted him politely. "I came to thank you again," the man said, sitting on the same wooden stool as before. "Your work saved me from great embarrassment. I had a very important meeting that night." The tailor smiled faintly. "I'm glad I could help. That is my job." The man looked around the small shop again, taking in the cracked walls and old furniture. "Do you own this place?" he asked. The tailor shook his head. "No, I pay rent every month. It's not much, but some days it's hard to manage." The man nodded slowly, as if thinking about something. Then he said, "I realized last night I didn't even tell you my name. I'm the head of a company in this city. That meeting you saved me for, it was with some big investors." The tailor didn't know how to respond. He had guessed this man was important, but he had no idea he was talking to the head of a major company. He only nodded and said, "I see." The man leaned forward a little. "Tell me," he said, "how long have you been doing this work?" The tailor thought for a moment. "More than 20 years, he said softly. "I learned this from my father when I was a boy. He had a shop like this one. Times were better then. Now people buy new clothes instead of repairing old ones." The man studied the tailor's face carefully. There was no bitterness there, only quiet acceptance. The tailor didn't speak like someone waiting for a miracle. He spoke like a man who knew life was hard but kept going. "Anyway, you must have dreams," the man said after a pause. The tailor smiled faintly and shook his head. "Dreams are for people who can afford them," he said. "I only want enough work to pay my rent and eat 3 meals a day. That is enough for me." The man fell silent for a while, watching the tailor adjust a pile of fabric on the table. Then he said, "You know, most people in your place would have taken the extra money I offered last night. But you didn't." The tailor looked up confused. "Why should I?" "You paid for the work I did. That was enough." The man smiled slowly, almost like he had just discovered something rare. "You didn't just fix my suit," he said quietly. "You reminded me that there are still honest people in this world." The tailor didn't know what to say. He only gave a small smile and continued folding the fabric neatly, as if the conversation was nothing unusual. Before leaving, the man asked for the shop's full address. "I might come back," he said casually. The tailor nodded and gave it without thinking much about it. Customers often said things like that and never returned. He had no idea that this man's next visit would change everything about his life. That night, as the tailor locked up his shop and walked home under the streetlights, he thought about the man's words. He wondered what it must be like to live in a world of suits, meetings, and big decisions. But he didn't envy it. His life was simple, hard, but it was his. He had no idea that fate was quietly weaving something bigger for him, just like the threads he wove through fabric every day. 2 days passed since the man last visited the tailor's shop. Life returned to its usual rhythm: long hours, a few customers, and enough work to keep the small sewing machine running. The tailor didn't think much about the man in the expensive suit. People came and went all the time. Some were kind, some were not. He had learned not to expect anything from anyone. On the 3rd day, the door of the shop opened in the afternoon. And there he was again, the same man with the sharp suit and confident walk. But this time, he wasn't in a hurry. He carried no torn clothes. He walked in with a calm smile, as though he had come with a purpose. The tailor greeted him politely, wondering why he had come back. The man looked around the shop once more, then at the tailor and said, "I thought about you a lot these past 2 days." The tailor looked surprised but said nothing. The man continued, "Do you know who I am?" The tailor shook his head slowly. "You said you are the head of a company," he replied. The man nodded. "Yes, my company works with businesses all over the country. We have offices in big cities, contracts worth millions, employees who earn more in a month than some people earn in a year. But do you know something?" He paused, looking straight into the tailor's eyes. "I started with nothing. My father was a factory worker. My mother stitched clothes in a small house, like you do here." The tailor felt a strange connection in that moment. He didn't say anything, but his eyes softened. The man smiled faintly. "When I saw you fixing my suit that night, refusing to take extra money, working late even when you were tired, it reminded me of my own mother. She used to say, if you want to build something strong, build it with honesty." The tailor looked down at his rough, tired hands. He had never thought his small axe could leave such an impression on anyone. Man reached into his pocket and took out a small card. "I want you to come to my office tomorrow," he said. The tailor hesitated. "Why?" he asked softly. The man smiled mysteriously. "Because I have something to discuss with you. Something important. Don't worry. It's nothing bad." The tailor felt uneasy. Big offices, rich people, these were not his world. He lived among fabric and thread, not suits and ties. "I'm just a tailor," he said quietly. "What would someone like me do in your office?" The man chuckled. "Just come. I promise you won't regret it." He handed the card to the tailor and left before the tailor could ask more questions. That night, the tailor couldn't sleep well. He kept thinking about the man's words. Why would a rich CEO want to meet him? What could someone like him possibly offer to a man with so much power and money? The thought made him nervous. He even considered not going at all. But the next morning, after finishing a few small repair jobs, he found himself standing outside a tall building with shiny glass doors. The name of the company was written in bold letters at the top. People in formal clothes walked in and out, carrying files, talking on phones. He felt out of place in his simple shirt and worn-out shoes. But he gathered courage, held the card tightly in his hand, and walked inside. At the reception, he gave his name nervously. The receptionist checked a list and smiled politely. "Yes, sir. He's expecting you. Please go to the top floor." The tailor's heart pounded as he entered the elevator. He had never been in such a big building before. When the doors opened on the top floor, he stepped into a world of polished floors, large windows, and expensive furniture. The man in the suit was waiting for him in a spacious office, with walls lined with books and awards. He greeted the tailor warmly and asked him to sit. "I'm glad you came," he said. "I have been thinking about you. People like you, hardworking, honest, skilled, deserve more than what life often gives them. And I want to change that for you." The tailor listened quietly, unsure where this was going. The man leaned forward. "I want to help you set up a proper tailoring shop. A big one. With new machines, workers to assist you, and enough money so you never have to worry about rent again." The tailor stared at him, stunned. Why would you do this for me?" he asked slowly. The man smiled kindly. "Because kindness deserves kindness. You didn't know who I was, yet you helped me without asking for anything. That honesty is rare. I want the world to see what a man like you can build when he is given the chance." The tailor didn't know what to say. His hands trembled slightly. For years he had dreamed of a better shop, but dreams were expensive. And here was a man offering it to him like it was nothing. But he didn't know that this offer was only the beginning. The tailor sat there in silence, his rough hands resting on his knees as the man in the fine suit explained his plan. It didn't feel real. For years he had worked in that tiny shop with cracked walls and flickering lights, dreaming of nothing more than paying rent on time and eating a full meal at night. Big dreams belong to other people with money, education, and connections. Not to men like him, and yet here was this powerful man, speaking calmly about building him a brand new shop with better machines, workers, and space enough to turn his small tailoring business into something grand. The tailor's first instinct was disbelief. "Sir, I think you misunderstand," he said softly, his voice trembling slightly. "I am only a simple man. I don't know how to run big shops. I have no experience with employees or modern machines. I just sew clothes by hand. That is all I know," the man smiled. "That is exactly why I want to help you. You have the skill. You have the honesty. I can provide the rest. Money, space, even people to guide you. You won't be alone in this." The tailor looked down at his old shoes, unsure what to say. He had lived a life where every coin mattered, where hope often led to disappointment. Part of him feared this was some kind of joke. The man seemed to read his thoughts. "You think this is too much," he said gently. "But believe me, it is nothing compared to what you deserve. You reminded me of my own father. He too believed in working hard with dignity, even when life was unfair. I could never help him when he was alive. But I can help you." Those words struck something deep in the tailor's heart. He blinked rapidly, holding back emotions he hadn't felt in years. No one had ever spoken to him like this. People often saw him as just another poor man in an old shop, someone who patched clothes and blended into the background of the busy city. But this man saw him. After a long pause, the tailor nodded slowly. "If you truly think I can do this, then I will try," he said softly. The man smiled broadly. "Good, because I've already made the arrangements." The tailor looked up in surprise. "Already?" "Yes," the man said. "Tomorrow morning, I want you to come with me. I have a place ready. It will be yours, fully equipped, paid for. No rent, no debt." The tailor's mouth went dry. He had no words left. The next day felt like stepping into another world. The man arrived in a sleek car and took the tailor across the city to a building with bright walls and a large signboard, covered by cloth. Workers were busy inside, setting up sewing machines, shelves, and mirrors. When they stopped at the entrance, the man gestured toward the shop with a proud smile. "This," he said, "is your new tailoring studio." The tailor stood frozen. The place was 3 times bigger than his old shop. The floors were clean and polished. The walls were freshly painted. There were several new sewing machines lined up neatly, shiny and modern, far better than his old rusty one. There was even a small reception desk and chairs for customers to wait comfortably, and then the man handed him a folder. Inside were legal papers with his name on them. The shop was registered in the tailor's name. It belonged to him now. The tailor held the papers with trembling hands. "Sir, this is too much," he whispered. The man shook his head. "No, this is what you've earned with your honesty. People like you are the reason this world still has goodness in it. I want everyone to see what happens when a man like you is given a real chance." By afternoon, the workers unveiled the signboard above the shop. The letters were bold and shiny. "Master Tailoring Studio, supported by Kareem Industries." The tailor stared at it, hardly able to believe his own eyes. Reporters had gathered, cameras flashing as the story spread. People from the neighborhood came running to see what was happening. The man gave a small speech, telling everyone about the tailor who had worked late into the night to fix his suit and refused to take extra money. "This," he said, pointing to the tailor, "is what honesty and hard work look like. And this is what it deserves in return." The crowd clapped, some even wiping their eyes. The tailor stood there quietly, overwhelmed. His whole life had changed in a single moment, but deep down, he knew this was not just about money or a big shop. It was about respect. For the first time in his life, people were looking at him not as a poor man, but as someone who had earned something through dignity and kindness, and this was only the beginning. The next morning, the tailor opened the doors of his brand new shop for the very first time. The golden sunlight spilled across the polished floor, the shining sewing machines, the neatly stacked shelves of fabric, and the bright signboard outside with his name on it that it didn't feel real. For years, his life had been a cycle of early mornings in a small, dim shop with cracked walls and a leaky roof. But today was different. Today, he stood in a place that belonged to him, a place he had never even dreamed of. Having the man who had given him this gift visited that morning too. He smiled as he saw the tailor looking around like a child seeing a festival for the first time. "Are you ready?" he asked warmly. The tailor nodded, though his heart was still pounding with disbelief. "I don't know how to thank you," he said quietly. The man shook his head. "You already did. The night you fixed my suit without asking for more money, you thanked me then. I just returned the favor." Soon, people from the neighborhood began arriving, curious about the new shop. Some had read about it in the local newspaper. Others had heard from neighbors. Many of them had known the tailor for years, seeing him work late into the night in his tiny old shop. Now they looked at him with admiration, as if they were seeing him for the first time. The tailor welcomed them with a shy smile. He showed them the new machines, the fitting rooms, the large mirrors, and the comfortable chairs where customers could sit while waiting. It felt strange to hear people whisper things like, "What a beautiful shop," and "He deserves this so much." By afternoon, the first real customer walked in, a young man with a suit that needed adjusting. The tailor worked carefully, his rough hands moving with the same quiet skill he had always used. But now, the place around him looked grand, professional, almost like the tailoring shops in big cities he had once seen only in magazines. As days passed, the shop became busy. Orders came in from offices, schools, even weddings. The tailor, who had once struggled to find enough work, now found himself hiring 2 young assistants to help with stitching and deliveries. He paid them fair wages, remembering his own struggles when he had been young and penniless. One evening, as he closed the shop, he noticed a group of children peeking through the window. Their clothes were old and patched, much like the ones he had seen all his life. Something stirred inside him. The next day, he called the children in and measured them carefully. A week later, each child received a brand new set of clothes made from leftover fabric in his shop free of charge. Word spread quickly. People began calling him not just a tailor, but a man with a big heart. Customers respected him not only for his skill, but for his kindness. Meanwhile, the man who had changed his life visited often, not as a powerful CEO, but as a friend. They shared tea in the evenings, talking about life, about struggles, about how small acts of honesty could change the world in ways no one expected. Months passed, and the tailor's business grew beyond anything he had imagined. He bought better tools, learned new techniques, and even started teaching young tailors who came from poor families like his own. He wanted them to have opportunities he never had when he was young. One day, a reporter came to interview him. "What was the biggest change in your life?" she asked. The tailor thought for a moment and said, "It wasn't the shop, or the money, or the customers. It was the way people look at me now with respect. That means more than anything else." The story of the broke tailor who fixed a CEO's suit and ended up with a thriving business spread far and wide. It inspired others to believe in kindness, honesty, and hard work. Years later, the tailor still kept the old sewing machine from his tiny shop in one corner of the new studio. It reminded him of where he had come from, of long nights, empty pockets, and simple dreams. And sometimes when no one was watching, he would sit at that old machine for a few minutes, stitching a small piece of cloth, not because he needed to, but because it reminded him of the life that had taught him the value of dignity and hard work. What began as a rainy evening, a torn suit, and a simple act of kindness had turned into a story people told again and again. A story about how one honest tailor fixed more than just a piece of fabric. He stitched his way into a better life, one thread at a time.